that. Do we need to do a audio roll call here to get started, or can we wait?
And here's Eric Molander. So let's get started. I'll do the roll.
Okay, perfect.
Michael Jordan,
Here.
Steve Fancher,
Here.
Eric Mueller,
Here.
John Niyama,
Here.
Shirley Craddock,
Present.
Ann Gravitt,
Here.
Corky Collier, James Allison,
Here.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Sorry, I think I hear you, but yes.
Tanny Stephenson,
Here.
Eric Molander, Ed Washington,
Here.
Bob Salinger, Janelle Bell, I'm counting 10 now.
Okay. Well, then let's go back to the agenda. And I think Janet, I think you're up first with the banking authorities. Is that right?
Doesn't get sent to you.
I sure am.
Okay.
So you guys are ready? Okay.
As will ever be.
Keith Hobson is the one that put this together, but he's out on vacation this week. So he asked me to present to the board. And this is a resolution that we are asking to amend the authorization and delegation of the financial transactions. I'm sure that everybody's already read through this, but it will be to change a little bit of the way that we have our signing authorities for checks, establishing new accounts for the urban district, which will hopefully help us to streamline, simplify some of the operations. So the recommended solution, it would amend the original authorization and delegation. So it would add the executive director on the authorization for opening all new accounts and updates the job title of the CFO to Director of Finance and Administration. It adds the Director of Finance and Administration on the authorization for opening new credit card accounts. Previously, it was only the executive director. It would expand financial authorities delegation to include electronic fund transfer, EFT payments, as well as regular paper district checks. It removes the requirements for 2 signatures on checks over 5,000. It removes the board chair, vice chair, and the budget committee chair as signers for check and EFT payments up to the limit of 75,000.
Thank you.
It would
I
centralize
think
staff.
there'll be a bunch more, but I'm not sure.
Pardon?
Mary Helen just needed to be on mute there for a second. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. It centralizes staff approval authority as the executive director, the director of finance of administration, and the finance manager to sign checks only up to 75,000. It also removes other deputy directors as authorized signers. Keith also put together an attachment, Exhibit A, which has a lot of red lines on it. So it shows what the existing authority is and what he's taking out and adding. So it's a real easy way to kind of see what he's removing, what he's putting in place. And then you'll see the actual resolution, and with the new Exhibit A, that will show exactly, the changes to that red line exhibit. Thank you, Wendy. So all of the things that are red line crossed out, those were items that were previously, and they're still in effect currently. So he's making these changes, taking those out, and then you'll see where he's added on other things.
And I think a point I would make is that the board retains the authority to change the delegation. It retains the budget authority. for approving the budget, we can't do anything unless it's in the approved budget, and anything over $100,000 still has to go to the board. So essentially, it takes boards out of the signing, but you're not doing a lot of that signing currently. I believe I got that right.
That is correct. The transfer of funds will remain the same, which will be the finance manager, the district accountant, and the director of finance and administration. And that is the transfer of funds that sit in the local government investment pool, which is where the majority of your money sits. We transfer it over to the checking account as we need it. There really isn't any fraud exposure there, as you can only transfer from the LGIP into your checking account and maybe back, but that's it. It can't go to any other account. No one has the ability to change anything with that.
Okay. Shirley has a question.
I was curious why you still left a limit at 75,000. I actually was wondering why it's not higher. It seems like it's still pretty, having that cutoff at 75 still is somewhat limiting and doesn't create much, still interferes with flexibility. So is there a particular reason why the 75,000 was selected? In most agencies, the board doesn't have to be involved in signing checks. So just curious why you left that in this effort.
Well, I think we don't have a lot of checks that are over the 75,000. So there's very few that the board would have to approve, or I believe that the executive director would sign anything over the 75. It just gives myself and I believe the director of finance and administration, the CFO, ability to sign up to 75. So I think, sometimes baby steps for a change. And like I said, it can be amended at any time. If we find that we are having, a higher volume to where the board has to be more involved, we can always make that change.
Okay, other questions, comments? Eric?
Yeah, I guess I view this as just part of the ongoing, evolving, getting the systems up and going. And as we had the previous resolution that we had adopted, that the red lines are from, they found another place to, get rid of some inefficiencies, and the controls are still in place. So, I just view this as an incremental improvement and am in support of the change.
Thank you. John? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, Exhibit A, page 1, under staff. Should that read Director of Finance and Administration?
Are you looking at the red line exhibit A or the final?
Yes.
The red line?
Yes.
It does say Director of Finance under the district checks or electronic fund. I guess
Under staff, it says in order of preference.
Oh, your copy doesn't say Director of Finance?
Mine says Direct of Finance and Administration.
Yeah.
Oh, Director.
I think
yes.
there's a typo. We can
Yeah,
fix that,
it's a typo.
Janet.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, yeah.
All right, we'll get the typo fixed. Thank you, John.
Yes.
Tanny?
I just want to kind of just throw something out from the other side. I was just curious, what are the inefficiencies that we're really faced with the current system? I just wasn't really aware that we did have very many of those. And then also too, I just think about, I know a lot of, especially you guys are used to big numbers and big contracts and things. But then when you're starting kind of a new government agency, are the optics better if we have more oversight than less oversight? I don't know, from the public's perspective. I just throw that out.
Anybody? Jim or or Janet,
Janet, anything you want to add before?
logistics right now?
I mean, I understand what Tanny is trying to convey about, perception. One thing that he had brought up is that MCDD is a vendor of the urban district, and I'm the finance manager for MCDD. We manage the urban district. So I think that we have the checks and balances in place, that we don't pay anything or do any projects that are not approved through your budget. So we go through the budget process, the budget committee approves those things. You have your budget adoption process. And then our project managers and managers are held within that budget and those projects that have been agreed upon. So that's, I guess, the authority and the checks and balances that we have, so that the board doesn't have to oversee every single check that is done.
And then just to speak to efficiencies, and I really appreciate the public perception question, and I want to stress to you all that we can, it's not the end of the world if we keep going the way we are. So I appreciate you raising it, Tanny. On a typical day, once a week, we have to have 2 staff come in to sign checks. And if we were working in the office, it would be different, but it's about an hour and a half travel time both ways. And candidly, I'm the boss of the other person signing the check already. So there is something there. I want to admit it, but I'm not sure that it actually increases the level of accountability as much as it means that Bill and I have to show up on the same day to sign the checks. But I value the notion of public trust, and it's more important than eliminating the need for somebody to come in and sign a few checks. So if the board's concerned about that, I would recommend we lean towards public trust. I think all the controls remain in place, and really in some respects, by removing some of the board signers, we've narrowed the accountability to a smaller subset of people than we currently have, is one way to think about it.
Other comments or questions? Obviously, we have a recommendation from, oh, go ahead, Eric.
Gonna unmute myself there, sorry. I was just going to offer a motion, Mr. Chair, since seems like we're at that point. So I would move approval of resolution 2022-0501, amending the authorization and delegation of financial transactions with the title correction on Exhibit A.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Eric Mueller moved, Shirley Craddock second. Any further questions or comments? Okay, we're gonna have to, are we reading the roll for these still? I've lost my memory for that.
The next item is the bylaws amendment, so I'll call the roll.
Okay,
Michael Jordan.
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt any further discussion. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Go for it.
Steve Fancher,
Yes.
Eric Mueller,
Yes.
John Niyama,
Yes.
Shirley Craddock,
Aye.
Ann Gravitt,
Yes.
James Allison,
Yes.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Yes.
Tanny Stephenson,
Yes.
Eric Molander,
Yes.
Ed Washington,
Yes.
Bob Salinger,
Yes.
Okay,
12 yeses.
terrific, thank you. So let's move on to the next item, which is a bylaws amendment. And Hong, are you taking us through this? You're on mute.
I am. Thank you. Exciting bylaw topic. I was hoping to be the first, but that's all right. Check signing is just as important. I am here coming back to you from last time. I understand that there was a request to make meetings more efficient, and there was a discussion or need to or desire to have voice vote. At the same time, we obviously need to comply with public records law. So I was fortunate to be given at least a month to think about how to affect this change. As you all know, our bylaw really just allows for roll call. And that is because and as many of you public officials know, we are required to at least capture in the minutes of board or director governing body members' votes by individual and by their name. However, as is with anything urban district, we are very unique, and it's extraordinary that we have a 17-member board. It's huge, and I understand that has caused some inefficiency for matters that may can go through quicker, such as non-controversial, non-important matters. And so we are proposing today for you with the resolution, it's in the packet, a change to the bylaw that allows for voice voting in some circumstance. The standard for that would be if there's clear efficiency, and we leave it up to the chair or the presiding officer to make that call. While we are allowing for this, we are not skirting public records law. The process that we propose gives Wendy, your meeting coordinator, an opportunity to be able to record the votes individually at the end of the day in the meeting minutes. So how it would work is, to the extent that there are matters that are needing should be voice vote for efficiency reasons, the chair will just call for that. And there will be a call for in unison, yes or no, aye or nay. To the extent that after that voting is called, if the individuals who voted in the minority or who abstained just need to identify themselves for Wendy to record. And then she'll record those as no votes. And everybody, all of the directors who are present who voted in the minorities don't need to identify themselves, but she'll just know to have you written down as voting in the majority, whatever that may be. The roll call vote is still readily available. Any director can call for a roll call vote prior to the voice vote being taken, or after the voice vote is being taken, but before the result is announced. Let's say you're just not sure and you really want a roll call vote. You can just raise your hand, roll call vote, and we'll go through the process to allow for that. The other opportunity for a roll call vote is if the voice vote result is indeterminate, or we can't conclude who won or who lost. So that is the proposal for you today. To affect a bylaw change, you have to have 2/3 of the boards voting, approving it. With, I think, while I think we have one vacancy on the board, you really need about 11 members to, so of the 12 of you, 11 of you must vote to pass it for it to be approved. With respect to what is an efficient matter, I would recommend that you think about that in terms of, is it controversial or not? Is it an important type of subject matter that should require or should have a roll call? I wouldn't recommend it for things like a formal resolution, but for consent agenda or, minor motions, that is something that you can consider. But it is up to the chair, and then of course any director can call for a roll call vote if a voice vote is not doable for whatever reason. So with that, in the packet I proposed, there is a memo with a red line of the proposed bylaw change. If you approve the resolution, it would just make one amended change to the bylaw. And that will then govern your process going forward to the extent that it's approved today. And you may use it today if you'd like, Chair Jordan.
Well, thanks, Hong.
Mhm.
Okay. Any questions or comments about this? James?
Thank you, Hong. Apologize if I missed this. I'm assuming we're going to be meeting in this Zoom format forever, but hopefully not. Is there any opportunity to use the check yes feature in Zoom as opposed to voice that would make it clearer and easier for staff to record it?
The check, you mean the
Polling.
The what?
The polling that.
I don't know what polling is that.
There's a
And
little,
from my perspective, the voice is easier because then I can
Okay.
type and hear at the same time, but thanks for the suggestion.
okay, got it. I'm fine. Thank you.
Eric?
Hung, just a couple of questions about this. First of all, why do you have the element in there prior to the announcement of the
Results announced?
yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was, when I drafted this, I searched around for examples, Eric, and this was built, that was suggested as something. It was just an additional out to the extent that there is an opportunity to call for a roll call if for whatever reason. I mean, I'm trying to allow for flexibility is really why I put it in there.
And who then gets to call for a roll call if it's indeterminate?
The chair, the presiding officer, or the director. Any director can call for it.
So any member of the board can say, I really don't know what that is. I'd
Sure.
like that to be at least for our record or minutes to show that any board member can call for a roll call if they feel that it's indeterminate.
Yes, I would say that you should allow for any director to make that call as well.
Okay. In that case, would any of the language have to be changed?
I can, I guess I can clarify that any director, I can move the language of any director and apply it to subsection B as well.
Good. So if
Right.
that were in there, I'd be, very much in favor of it.
Okay, yeah, if that is the desire of the board, we can make that change.
I think that makes sense. Mary Helen?
Sorry, I'm having all kinds of speaker issues, but I think they're cured. My question about this is how the public would view the transparency of this and the responsibility that we have to report to our constituents. Would there be any way to recourse if somebody wants to know who voted how, that they could get that information? I have several people that would ask that.
Yeah. So this does not change how Wendy's going to record the meeting minutes. It will still reflect individual members and how they vote. It's just, this allows for voice voting during the meeting so that we can get through the bulk of the agenda item. But the way that she's going to record it is if you voted in the majority and you're present, you will be noted on the meeting minutes as voting in the majority, whether that's yes or no. If you voted in the minority during the meeting here, she will ask who voted in the minority, and she'll expect you to identify yourself or to abstain. And then that way she'll just note it. But the meeting minutes will reflect what she has here. It still reflect individual board voting, and that is the accountability and transparency that you are needing, Mary Helen.
Okay, well, thank you, because I mean, I know like city council, they do consent agendas and they all say aye,
Yep.
but you get to see who says it. And in
Yep.
this case, so anyway, okay, thank
we
you.
will
I
still
think
have
that'll address that issue or concern.
Okay. Tanny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just thinking about this, and I'm all for like the consent agenda and things, doing a voice vote, but when you start getting into legal documents that are going to affect other people, such as resolutions and ordinances,
Yep.
I'm just not sure why and you end up in a room with a bunch of public in there that want to see how everybody is voting.
Okay.
I'm just not sure why we don't want to be upfront with that and just do a roll call.
Yeah, so we still, again, in terms of accountability and tracking how each individual board member is voting on a matter, it will be reflected as such in the meeting minutes. But I agree with you, Tanny. This voice vote is not intended to be for more formal, important matters. I have in the bylaw proposed for it to be just efficient as deemed by the chair. If you would like, if this board would like for me to add additional qualifier to address your need, I'm happy to do that as well. To qualify it so that we are not taking it up with more important issues.
Thank you.
Wendy?
Yeah, I just want to say that in the past, you were prohibited from using the voice vote for a consent agenda. And that's why we were making the change that would allow to have a voice vote for items like the consent agenda. And as we clarified earlier, if anyone wanted a voice vote for the consent agenda or something else on a particular day, then you would just need to ask for that. So what it does is give flexibility to the board to do it as appropriate for that particular vote.
Other questions or comments? Does anyone, I guess, want language in this that would make it clear that, I don't know how to even describe it, more important issues be required to be a roll call? Or you want to leave it, since any board member has the right to call for a roll call at any time, before or after, it seems like we all have kind of joint responsibility to make sure the public gets clarity on this. But I guess I'm posing a question. Eric?
Yeah, I would just say that, I would be hesitant to try and qualify it in the bylaws because, we're inevitably going to become short in our definition. And I think we may very well have some important resolution that we're all wholeheartly in 100% agreement on, that, it's important, but there's no dissent from it. So I'd be hesitant to codify it that way. The only language adjustment I would like was the one that I think that Eric had previously referenced, and that Han had mentioned that she could add that any director may call for a roll call vote. If she just simply adds that to that very last sentence of the changes of in the section or the subsection B, then I think it provides all the ability for anybody that has a concern that we need to have something recorded as a roll call to be able to speak up and say so.
Thank you. Mary Helen?
I share those same concerns because I'm trying to think about Wendy and all the tasks that she has. And if it's that much of a time saver, or if someone questioned this, how much time it would be to respond to that question. And if we just left it as it is, I think we all know in dealing with people that have complaints, and I can see issues just in my little neighborhood of people questioning, well, what are you doing with our money? Those kinds of things. And if they can't look and see who voted how, or maybe it's given them more fuel for their complaints, but I don't know the time difference in the tasks, because as she's recording all those people that are in the majority, and I can see check one big box and only one not. But I defer to being able to make her job easier. But I also want to keep in mind what, it's one of those be careful what you wish for things, especially in this process when we're going to have people say, trust us, we know what we're doing, and or this is what we are doing. And this makes it more evident that we want to share all the information we have with the constituents. So I'm fine either way, but I don't want to, I guess I've been sitting here trying to think about what would take more time. Somebody, a couple people or a neighborhood or business complaining to respond to, as opposed to polling 12 people how they vote. So.
Yeah, I see you. Jim?
I might just want to respond to that concern that, remember, the minutes are going to document who voted which way. We're just, we're creating a procedural efficiency. So if there is a concern from anyone, the minutes will reflect the actual votes in every case.
No, I realize that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is if they don't reflect that, or they're not easily accessible through the minute, who voted, like how we're doing it now, if that takes that much more time to respond to somebody who doesn't have that right away. But either way, it's fine. I guess I've dealt with too many citizen complaints to want to alleviate that, as opposed to make it easy for us.
Thank you. Shirley?
I appreciate Eric Mueller's suggestion regarding the directors. So I was going to ask Hong, how would you phrase the motion? Because I'm glad to make a motion here, but how would you phrase it to include Eric Mueller's suggestion?
Yeah, great question. So I would say move to approve resolution number with the amendment to provide for changes. Okay, so is there, I think I can type it in here, but changes to that particular section in the bylaw. So may I draft the suggested language in the chat here?
Yeah, please go ahead. I'm glad to make a motion. I would move to adopt resolution 2022-05-02, allowing a voice vote process, including a statement regarding that directors may ask for a roll call when needed.
Yep.
Okay, that's my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Shirley and a second by Eric Mullender. Any further questions or comments? All right, now I'm going to ask for a roll call vote here because it's important. We're changing the bylaw. So
Michael Jordan,
yes.
Steve Fancher,
Yes.
Eric Mueller,
Yes.
John Niyama,
Yes.
Shirley Craddock,
Aye.
Ann Gravitt,
Yes.
James Allison,
Yes.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Yes.
Tammy Stephenson,
No.
Eric Molander,
Aye.
Ed Washington,
Aye.
Bob Salinger.
Yes.
11 yeses, 1 no.
Okay, the motion passes. So now we have the option of doing voice votes on occasion. And as a matter of fact, I think the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And so I'm going to try to remember this. Hong, you can correct me if I make a mistake. I think the first thing I'm going to do is ask, are there any board members who would like to remove any item from the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, if we just have a small technical change to one of the minutes,
Okay,
do we need to send that through this process, or how do we want to handle that?
why don't you tell me which one it is, Eric?
Before you do, I just want to say that Eric Mueller and I went through and corrected a number of errors in dates and people's titles on the minutes for the budget committee and the work session.
Yeah, so if there are just administrative changes, punctuations, things like that, I don't think you need to pull it from the consent agenda. But if there are substantive inaccurate reflections, then that will definitely need to be pulled from the consent agenda, the corrections to be discussed and then voted on.
So Hung, the specific element was that
Uh-huh.
when we were talking about the draft minutes from March 21st,
Okay.
Molander expressed concern about the projected delay, blah, blah, blah. He cited a projected 30% increase. That should actually read an actual increase in the non-residential construction cost index.
I think something like that is substantive enough that should be pulled from the consent agenda. And so for that particular set of minutes, you pull it from the consent agenda, talk about the correction, and then vote on it with the correction, if that hasn't already been done. So I don't know where we are with that. Are you asking, Eric, for the correction to that set of minutes now, or have you already asked for a change?
So I want to know the process. So
Okay.
what I would like to be able to do is do this not so in a way that we can get to the consent agenda and everybody says, yeah, that's fine. But I received this today when I returned and didn't have a chance to talk to Jim or Wendy about it. So
Sure. Yeah, so the process would be that it's well within your prerogative to call for it to be withdrawn, and I would recommend that for that particular type of correction,
Okay.
Eric.
Okay, so we're gonna withdraw item A, which are the budget committee minutes from March the 21st, 2022. Are there any others that need to be taken off this? Shirley, you have a question?
No, I'm going to make a motion. I move to approve the consent agenda items B through G.
And do we need a second for that kind of a motion?
second,
Okay, Eric seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. All right, the motion passes unanimously. All right, now should we go back to March the 21st? Eric, do you want to talk about the correction you want to be made there?
So on page 20 of 63, in the paragraph that is the fourth from the bottom, it should read, he cited an actual 30% increase in the non-residential construction cost index.
Did you get that?
Not immediately finding it, so I'm happy to bring this back to you next month. Oh, we can't because it's a budget committee, isn't it?
So
March 21st.
March 21st.
So
Okay.
I think I got it. So let me help Wendy out here. So Eric, it should read that he cited an actual 30% increase in a non-residential index. Is that accurate?
Non-residential construction cost index.
Got it.
Okay. We have the appropriate wording for that.
I would second his amendment to the proposed minutes.
Okay. Can we voice vote this? All right. All those in favor of the
Aye.
amendment to the minutes, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. All right, it passes. Now, see how much time we saved there?
Now, do we,
Okay.
Han, do we need to actually now approve the minutes that we amended?
Yes,
Oh, I thought we were voting on an amendment, excuse me.
So I would move to approve the March 21st, 2022 Budget Committee minutes as amended.
Second.
And I missed who the second was. Steve, thank you. All right, all those in favor of the minutes, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. All right, hopefully your future chair will do a lot better at this than the current chair. All right, next item on the agenda is what? Oh, equity strategy development. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks all of you. I know that felt, trying to find the right adjective, but it was actually really important work you guys just did, and it will help in the long run. So thank you very much for your attention and the thoughtful discussion around all of that. Appreciate it. As you know, when the Oregon legislature created the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District, they created some new mandates and applied those to the new district through ORS 550. And I don't know about you, but I like to read most of the statute every day to keep it fresh. But I'll just read to you from the really opening clauses. But it says an urban flood safety and water quality district is created for the purpose of acquiring, purchasing, constructing, improving, operating, and maintaining works in order to. And there is a list of a number of items, but the relevant item for our conversation today is under subsection F, where it says promote equity and social justice in all aspects of the district's operations. So that is why we are having this conversation today. And as you know, your staff has proposed the creation of an equity frameworks in order to obtain guidance from you as a board to establish clear baseline recommendation or baseline definitions so that we're talking about the same things as we proceed into this really important work mandated by the legislature. And I want to remind you that there are really 3 phases that will ultimately get us to the place where I think we could all believe in our hearts and with a straight face tell the public that we have embodied both the spirit and the letter of the law. And those 3 steps are really the creation of this equity framework so staff can get clear direction from our policy leaders on the board. That equity framework is what we're talking about today. And then that equity framework will form the basis for the development of agency-wide and department-specific equity action plans. Once those plans are created and approved by the board, we would begin an equity action plan implementation process. Today, what we hope to discuss with you as a follow-up to some previous meetings is the definition of equity itself, and then to begin to get into a little bit about the equity mission and the equity vision of the organization. Staff has created some drafts building on the work of the MCDD Board of Directors Equity Policy. And we have with us today the consultant team that we have been working with, Ontiveros and Associates. And they're here to help walk us through both the definition of equity, some of the steps that will lead us to some implementation actions, but also to begin the conversation to get direction from you all around the proposed equity mission and the proposed equity vision. So I'm really happy to have the benefit of their expertise with us today. And if you have questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Brett Watson, who is with Ontiveros and Associates, and he's going to help lead that conversation. It looks like at least there's one question.
It's me, always questions. I wanted to know if somebody, staff, Ontiveros, explain when we put all the work into the mission, vision, values, and equity was a big piece of that, if any of that information is going to be used, or was that, how is that going to be incorporated, all of that work and adoption? I think Evan can answer it, but I guess I'm kind of confused because it seems like we did a lot there and might inform some of what we're going to go forward with, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, it has already informed the direction of the equity framework. And I think you'll see a lot of parallel work there. We've really taken the higher level mission, vision, values of the entire organization, and the equity framework is our effort to distill it into some better direction and clearer sideboards for us to move forward. Evan, would you like to add anything?
No, I think that captured it perfectly. The only thing I would note, Mary Helen, is that once you're looking at the framework, there's going to be some guiding principles and other language in there that directly came from the conversations that we had through the mission, vision, value process. And those directly came from the process that the MCDD board and staff worked on under Karen Carrillo a couple of years ago and with Oniveros and Associates help. So hopefully it'll be familiar, some of the language.
And I want to just ensure all the board members, this is a challenging topic. So questions are really terrific and there are no bad questions in this space. So I hope you recognize we welcome all your questions and hope to do a good job answering them. So Mary Helen, I appreciate you raising the question that you did. And if others have them, please bring them. If there are no further questions, Brett, I would turn it over to you to start the presentation and hopefully work with the board to get some good direction today.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Brett Watson. Thanks for having us today. Amber Ontiveros is here too. Our firm's, like Jim said, been working with MCDD and now UFSWQD for a couple of years now on equity initiatives. And like we've covered so far, the past few months, most recently, we've been working on really getting the past work that has been done on equity definitions and equity frameworking updated and inclusive of staff comments and just, you know, other updates that have happened since that work had initially gone before some of you. So, you know, as Jim shared, this is really important work with some really compelling drivers and the draft framework has had a lot of good input so far. To get it into a space where it's ready for a little bit of discussion today. I don't want to spend too long doing any kind of presentation, but I do want to do a little bit of context setting. Ultimately, what I hope we can drive for today is to get board members into some breakout rooms and start discussing the proposed draft equity mission and value statement. So focusing on those two pieces today in some small groups and then doing some report outs just to do some gut checks with you all to make sure that the language that's included in those is on the right track since they're pretty foundational to the framework and then the action planning that comes after that. One thing that I just did want to spend a little bit of time on before we jump into that though, is I wanted to just do a little bit of context setting around what the equity framework is. I think that's important. I think it's good to just kind of ground that in the overall process so that we're all kind of entering into those discussions with a good sense of where we're going with this work. All right, so what is the framework? What it's intended to do is drive the incorporation of equity into the district's decision-making by providing things like an equity mission, vision, goals, important definitions, guiding principles, anticipated outcomes, all those things that support future equity action planning and policymaking that you'll all do. It also provides guidance and understanding of the district's equity approach for stakeholders. So all of this stuff over here in this green box, more or less is what the framework is driving towards. Ultimately, it seeks to answer 4 big questions, and that's the why, the what, the who, and the where. So the equity framework is going to make a case for why the framework's needed and define how it's going to be applied. It's going to talk about what is meant by equity at the district and what outcomes the district is seeking around equity. It'll go into talking about who's likely to benefit or experience burden from the district's programs, services, and activities. And it'll talk about where the district's area of impact is today and where it's likely to be in the future as well. So that's what the framework is. And then Jim touched on it, but where does the framework fit into the overall equity process? Ultimately, what we hope to do with this is get a really solid framework that is approved and enjoys a lot of acceptance from the board. And then we want to use that document that includes all those things that I just talked about, and jump into about a year-long process of equity action planning. And what that would seek to do is establish, department by department, how the district will implement equity, set evaluation metrics, and identify responsible parties for implementing and then monitoring those equity outcomes. Just a slightly different version of that graphic. Sorry that it's a little pixelated. I wanted to flash this up quickly just to show off this proposed timing down at the bottom of those big stages that I just talked through. Want to start talking about framework adoption now. If we can get an approved framework sometime this summer, assuming about a year of that equity action plan development work, and then about 3 months or a quarter of planning, implementation, and accountability measures. So again, proposed timeline, things might drift a little bit, but that's what we are hoping to reach and to drive towards as far as schedule goes. I want to stop here and just do a quick temperature check, see if there's any thoughts or questions that anyone has. And I don't know if I can see hands, so if someone can help me see if anyone does have any questions, that would be super helpful. Right.
I don't see any hands.
Well,
right now.
hearing none, please feel free to interrupt me if something comes up. But what are we doing today? Obviously, these are big documents. They're complicated. They require a lot of thoughtfulness on your part before you would want to approve them. So we wanted to just kind of start a little slow and begin by looking at some of the biggest components of the framework. And that would be the proposed equity mission and the proposed equity vision. I will flash those up on screen in a little bit. I'll read through the language so that you can start the process of processing through those. And then Amber and I will lead 2 breakout groups of board members. And we just have, some quick questions. What do you like about it? What stands out about the statements as they are authored so far? Do you have any questions about them? And if we could then spend a few minutes after breakout time to just kind of do a little bit of a thought exercise as the larger group and raise any of those questions, do a quick report out. I think that would be helpful to just flag any big concerns that anyone has at this early stage with where the language is going. So with that, the proposed equity mission can be found on page 40 of your board packet. The district recognizes there are systems of power, privilege, and access that create inequity and injustice. More specifically, Oregon's history of racial and ethnic segregation and discrimination created, reinforced, and exacerbated inequities experienced by people the district serves. The district will seek to understand these impacts and to embed equity in its operations, including service delivery, internal policies and practices, operations, organizational culture, communications, partnership development, community engagement, and its ongoing efforts to modernize and pay for flood safety infrastructure. Next big statement, the vision, also on page 40 of the board packet. The district is committed to advancing equity because everyone deserves to live and work in a safe, healthy, and climate resilient environment, have equitable opportunities to prepare, respond, recover, and rebuild from flood emergencies, and have opportunities to experience, learn about, and participate in the cultural history of the managed floodplain. The district will work to embed equity and environmental justice into hazard mitigation planning, ensuring everyone is able to prepare for, evacuate from, and recover after flooding. So those are the 2 big pieces that I think it would be helpful if we just focus some time on today. Like I said, one group will look at the proposed equity mission, other will look at the values. I want to do a time check with folks here. Is 10 minutes in breakout and then maybe a 5 to 7 minute wrap up after we get back? Does that sound realistic as far as we are with timing? Yes. All right, we'll plan for that then. I'll bump us into breakout rooms in a few minutes. If you could just keep tabs on how conversation's going. Amber will be in one room, I'll be in the other. So we're glad to do some note taking and facilitate the report out. But it would be great to just kind of get those information, the information in front of everybody once we do our little conversations. I'm gonna stop sharing. And then I'm gonna bump the breakouts. Staff and others, if you could just hang tight for 10 minutes in this room and we'll be back then. If anyone has any comments to share with me, please let me know, Jim or Evan, and I will be on the lookout for those, okay?
Hey, Brett, before you take off, it
Yeah.
looks like Michael Jordan didn't end up in a room.
I'm in number 1.
Oh, good, you are, perfect.
That's what it
You're just
says.
hanging out with us.
Okay.
Are there any other board members who are not assigned yet? All right.
Looks good.
Evan, if you could just be on watch for that, that would be much appreciated. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Coming back. Thanks for doing that exercise, everyone. I want to spend just a couple of minutes and kind of share some of what we heard big picture in the rooms. I'll flash the statements back up on screen as we read through them. Amber, I wonder if you or if any of the group 1 breakout folks have anything that they would like to share on impressions that they had when they read the equity mission.
Sure, I will start and kind of recap some of the things that we heard, and I was in mid-sentence when I had to come back to the.
Apologies about that.
So essentially what we heard from our group was that they believe that the framework needs to include a broader definition to include social and economic status. And so one recommendation was including renters. And I just wanted to clarify something with regard to the population for whom we have included in the equity framework right now. Right now, the population is a race neutral group. In other words, in the mission, vision, and values that y'all created, is the racial equity analysis. And in the framework that we have developed, it's race neutral. However, it does require a certain type of analysis that will ensure that we meet the requirements that you've listed, which is to do a racial equity analysis. But I do think, given the comments that I heard from at least our group, which is that to ensure that we have people with disabilities, that we have renters, I think we will probably want to re-examine the populations within the framework to ensure that it meets your desired outcomes. So that's kind of that's a high level overview in a nutshell. Brett.
Thanks, Amber. Anyone else in group 1 have any kind of big burning thoughts to share on the mission statement? Steve?
I don't know if it's big or burning, but we didn't have time to kind of get through a whole lot there, but it's more of a minor thing, but it seems like the second half of this whole statement, we kind of get into a list of various things that the district does, and inevitably you leave something out, right? So it could be simpler, cleaner, shorter, just to say, the district will seek to understand these impacts and to embed equity in all areas of its operations, period, and cut about half of the statement out. Just a suggestion.
Thank you. All right, jumping to vision, I wanted to just quickly read some of the big thoughts that we had. I think the primary thing that I heard in the room was that the language may need to be updated to take it less from a space of emergency response and focus a little bit more on the prevention aspect of flood safety. Just make sure that that is worked in and is mindful in the vision. Also, I think we discussed that visions are aspirational and they're kind of what we're aiming for, and continuing to keep in mind the responsibility piece, what the responsibility of the district is to the communities that live in the floodplain. There's a big community safety role that the district plays. So in the kind of aspirational mix, make sure that that's recognized in the statement. And then also there are some words in there. Ones that were called out were the words deserved and the word ensure. And those words may just take a little bit of additional focus to make sure that they are defined appropriately in the framework and then used appropriately in the vision. So I would also turn the same question over to my group and see if anyone has anything that they would like to share that wasn't covered. All right, I know that was kind of a rapid fire exercise on some big important statements, but I hope it was a useful primer to just start thinking about them. And I think the offer stands that if you sign off of today's meeting and you have something else in mind, this is certainly the beginning of the conversation, not the end. So please share it with Jim, please share it with Amber and myself, and we're very glad to continue to work with you all to get this into a space that you're comfortable with.
And Brett, while we're together, and I know we're short on time, but we took advantage as a staff team and visitors to discuss a little bit the language, and a couple of thoughts came out. First, think about including all the district's operations. It felt a little bit limited, similar to what you guys said. And I think another really valid point that was echoed by one of your groups was don't overpromise. And words like ensure could be problematic, but attempt or strive or things like that. But make sure we're being reasonable about what we're going to accomplish with the authorities and assets that we have. So,
thank you, Jim. All right, last thing that I have before we can move on to the next agenda item, I just wanted to close with where we go from here and just kind of set the stage for where you might hear this come up at some future meetings. Proposal is that at the June 8th board work session, spend a little bit of time in kind of the same way discussing some of the other foundational pieces of the framework, namely the goals and some equity definitions. And then in the meantime, between now and the June 20th board meeting, review the full draft of the equity framework. At that meeting, please bring your questions, thoughts for further discussion, and then we could consider adopting it from there. It may take more time than that, but continuing that discussion and having those conversations at that next board meeting. And then once the framework's approved by y'all, begin the equity action planning process. So that's a 30,000-foot overview of where we're going next. And like I said, definitely the beginning of this conversation, not the end.
I guess just in closing, I would share that after the most recent training or work session with you all, I had a couple of conversations with board members that I felt like we maybe spent an hour just talking about this work, and it was really valuable for me. It's really hard for me to spend an hour with all 17 of you or 16 of you, but if any of you want to talk about any of this, I really value your perspective. So I hope you will pick up the phone and give me a call, and I'm always happy to chat with you. It was also enlightening, I think, for several of us to just recognize that there may be a more, well, I think there may be more alignment on the types of actions that the staff is contemplating than you may think. So we're pretty focused on our flood safety role and how we can do flood safety in a way that advances social justice and equity. So again, if you have concerns, please pick up the phone and I'd be happy to chat with you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Thanks you all. Appreciate everybody's work. And good to see you again, Amber. Haven't seen you for a little while. Next item on the agenda is polling strategy. Evan?
Yeah, hi folks. I am delighted to introduce you to Dave Matz with FM3 Strategies. Just want to make sure that Dave is there. I know he's been waiting a little while. Dave, I'm calling you if you're ready. So Dave Matz, we brought on FM3 Strategies a couple of months ago to work with us to develop a singular poll to kind of get us started and going on the work that we recognize we need to do over the next couple of years to get this revenue structure set up and to get a geo bond passed. Dave and his team at FM3 Strategy actually were part of the on-call communications contract that you all approved last month, and his team will be working with us on sort of an ongoing basis as well now to support the public opinion research that we need. So we're just starting to have some preliminary conversations about what that big picture strategy looks like. And the poll that he's going to share with us today is really just our starting place. It's to give us some information, particularly around talking about flooding. You know, Jim and I have seen a lot of polling over the years, but flooding is not one of the areas that was really focused. So it would be really great to get some information to support us in that messaging. We also are going to do a little bit of testing on a few different things that Dave is going to walk you through. I think a couple things just in terms of what we're hoping for from you all. If you do want to get into line edits, if we could do that offline and not in this space, I think that would be most productive. And this is really an opportunity to talk to our pro about his thinking and his team's strategy around their recommendations for this draft. The hope is that we're pretty close to wrapping it up. We have a few issues with with the Echo Northwest team that we've asked for some help in terms of dollar amounts to include in this poll. Hopefully we'll be there relatively soon and able to put this out in the field. So with that, Dave, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you for your patience today.
No problem. Thank you very much, Evan. And thanks to all of you for the chance to join you today. It's good to see a few familiar faces from work we have done doing opinion research for a number of you and with your respective agencies in the past. So I'm going to walk through the survey instrument that we've prepared, and I just want to underscore a couple of points that Evan made by way of introduction and emphasize what this poll is not intended to do, as well as what it is intended to do. It is intended to provide us with a baseline of where public awareness of flood risks is in the region, to understand what types of flood improvements they are most enthusiastic about, to understand what kind of messaging helps them to understand the scale of the risk and the wisdom of the solutions that the district will be pursuing moving forward, and also to give us some sense of the public sensitivity when it comes to ways that potential ballot measures that may be put before voters in the future could be structured. What's their tax tolerance for investments in flood protection? What type of structure for both capital and operating funding are they most comfortable with the idea that this poll is not going to provide us with definitive answers to those questions, but give us some sense of a starting point of whether the public is enthusiastically behind it, whether they're suspicious about it, or whether, as we suspect may be the case, it really isn't a subject they've spent much time thinking about before, and as a result, they may need more information and education before they can really weigh in firmly about how they would vote on something that's put before them. So this poll is not designed to test a concept of a ballot measure in a rigorous way that would allow us to make a recommendation to you about the feasibility of such a measure. There are plans to do that kind of research down the road, but this is a much more foundational step. And then second, this is a quantitative instrument. We're going to interview hundreds of voters selected at random from within the new boundaries of the district, and be able to sort of generalize what we learned from that poll to that broader population. But there's a lot that we could learn from more open-ended conversations with local residents about their perspectives. And I think qualitative research is envisioned to be part of that another part of that upcoming phase of research that will follow this, which will allow us to dig into areas in the survey findings that may be a little bit ambiguous or that may sort of lead to follow-up questions that we didn't think to ask in the survey, and understand with a little bit more depth and nuance the way that local residents approach them. So with all of that as a preamble, I'm going to go ahead and share the survey instrument that we've been working on with staff here. I will note that we are at about our target length on this instrument. So anything we want to add is going to mean that something else has to come out. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then in terms of the overall structure of the poll, I'll sort of walk through it quickly and explain the logic of how it's organized and the major questions we're asking. And then if you'd like me to go back and focus on any individual question in more depth or detail, I am happy to do so. So with that introduction, here is the survey questionnaire. Our approach here is going to be, as I said, we're applying the new boundaries of the district to the voter file. We'll draw a random and representative sample of voters from throughout the district. We'll do interviews on landline phones, wireless phones, and then online with both text messages and email invitations to drive people to the online survey, which is the standard approach that's taken for these types of surveys these days. So with that, again, I'll walk through it fairly quickly here just to give you a sense of the overall structure, and then we can go back and revisit individual questions. We have a couple of questions here just to sort of ease people into the flow of the survey, make sure we're talking to the individual voter that's been randomly sampled, make sure that people we're talking to on a cell phone or somewhere safe. We're also intending to oversample voters of color so that we can speak to their perspectives with more precision than is often the case in broad polling. And so we have a question up front for that oversample to make sure that we are indeed speaking with local voters of color. We then start with a question one, where we ask people their opinion of a variety of different organizations that are involved with these flood protection efforts, city government, county government, metro, et cetera. And then we offer people a list of issues facing Multnomah County and ask them to rate the seriousness of each one from their perspective as a problem. Now we're including a number of items here that we know are very prominent on the list of concerns that local residents have. Things like homelessness, for example, or the amount you pay in taxes. But then we're mixing those in with a variety of other items that tie back to flooding, or that tie back to other kinds of natural disasters or climate change related risks that the community might face, just so that we can understand how the things that the work of this district will affect stack up to other issues that are on voters' minds right now. We then, in a similar vein, have a question that we've asked for other flood control agencies and similar research we've done around the country, where we ask people to rate the relative risk they believe that they face from a variety of different types of disasters that might affect the area, wildfires, earthquakes, drought, heat events, heavy rain, but then also flooding. And again, this will just give us a baseline to understand where that perception of flood risk is among the public, how intense it is, and to the extent that it varies between different subgroups of the population. Looks like we have a question here from Eric.
Well, I was just getting in line for the end when you were going to take questions, so I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I guess I'll ask up front.
Sure.
How long is this survey expected to take somebody who's responding to it? Because when I looked at it in the packet, I was like, we're really going to get people to answer this many questions?
Yes, it's a good point. So the survey is targeted to take no more than 20 minutes for the average respondent to complete. That is going to sound like an eternity to you for someone to spend on the phone talking about flood control. But we do a lot of surveys of this type, and what we basically find is once people understand that we're not trying to sell them anything or ask for a donation, but we're asking about issues that are important to the safety of their community and what they pay in taxes, we can usually get about 20 minutes of their time before they start to get restless. And then we start to see after that, the rate of people hanging up the phone really starts to take off. So our goal is to be 20 minutes or shorter, and shorter is always better for all the reasons that you can understand. The survey looks a little bit longer on paper than it will take for the average respondent to complete. And part of the reason for that is you'll see some questions, like in question 2 here, where we have these notations, split sample A and split sample B. And what that means is for some of these questions where we have a long list of items that we're asking about, we'll randomly divide our sample into 2 halves, each of which will be itself a random and representative sample of the district, and ask half the items of half the sample and half the items of the other half. That allows us to get feedback on a wider range of items without forcing every individual respondent to walk through the same long list. So you're seeing everything on the paper, but the respondent in many cases will only be getting asked about half the items that you're seeing in front of you. So that helps it feel a little shorter in reality than how it looks on paper. And then it looks like a question from Mary Helen.
It's sort of related to that, because when I first saw it, I thought, holy cow, I wouldn't sit still. And even if they were going to tell me this is how I got $100, or if I was going to get a stipend. But other than that, are there any accommodations for people that have hearing disabilities or I don't know how I'm going to say this, illness, that sort of thing? I guess it's like somebody that has 20 minutes on their time frame, and I might be an exception that I don't care what they're asking about. I wouldn't take 20 minutes to answer a survey. That's just me. And it seems like a really broad survey to ask people, do you know you have a levy? Are you willing to pay for it? And what are you willing to pay for? Is what it's really sounds like it's going to be consolidated to. So I second Eric's concern about length and being in a neighborhood where I can barely get people to stop and talk to me for 2 minutes on the sidewalk, and they're my neighbors and they like me. Strangers calling them on the phone, I don't think we'll have much more success.
Well, it certainly is the case that fewer people respond to surveys than was the case 20 or 25 years ago when I started in this business. And that's part of the reason why we don't just call people on the phone, but we also have an online component to it as well. There's many folks who would never pick up their phone, but if they get an emailed invitation that's coming from a public agency that's asking them for their opinion, they're willing to click on it and respond at a time that's convenient to them than when they get the call.
Sorry, I didn't catch that there was going to be an online version. Okay.
And that addresses also for people who have visual or auditory disabilities. The fact that we do it in 2 modes means that we can accommodate both types of respondents and make sure that people aren't excluded on that basis. All right, so moving on, we then delve more directly into flooding. We ask people if they can remember serious flooding in Multnomah County. Obviously, there has been in recent history, but certainly many residents of the region who moved here more recently, and there's quite a few of them, may not recall it, and even some who were present. It may have faded a little bit with memory. So it's interesting for us to see how much people do recall that and whether those who do recall it view these issues differently than those who do not. We then give people a description of essentially what the flood risks are and tell them that there is a new district that has been created that has the assignment of consolidating the responsibilities of existing drainage districts to manage the those risks and the way those rivers flow through the community, and then tell people conceptually that there may be a bond measure to provide funding to support repairs and improvements to the levee system. Again, this is not an attempt to mimic exactly the way a bond measure might be presented, testing ballot language or specific details, but just in raw figures. If we're talking about something that is hundreds of millions of dollars, that's a bond measure, is that something you'd be for or against? We also ask about operating funding, which could be provided through either a small property tax increase or a small new charge on your utility bill. Just trying to find out broadly whether either of those mechanisms is acceptable to the public as a way of raising those funds to go with the capital funding that a bond measure. will.
No, it's the levy thing, but yeah, yeah.
Well, even better.
Then we test a variety of specific either projects that might be funded by one or the other of these funding sources, or objectives that might be achieved, sort of outcomes that we might be seeking to accomplish as a result of funding and executing them. We ask the respondents to rate how important each one of these is to them. And what we're looking for here are either specific elements of work that will be done by the district, or ways of describing and articulating it that seem to have connect with a higher level of urgency with the public. And that will help to inform our messaging. The goal here is not to shape policy. Obviously, you all know what's needed from an engineering perspective and a climatological perspective, but to help us figure out the best way to connect with the public and talking about what it is that you do, given that, as we see in most cases, many people don't know what or where the levy system is. And so, finding the right language to click with people can be helpful. Having done that, a few more questions that relate to the potential structure of a funding mechanism or mechanisms. We ask people what their willingness to pay is to support flood control projects. And as Evan noted, we're waiting for the dollar figures to plug in here to sort of test a realistic range of what the district might be asking of local residents to pay on an annual basis. And after that, we then turn to messaging. We give people a list of a variety of different problems or challenges that flooding in the region might cause, and ask them how concerned they are about each one. Some of these are risks to personal safety. Some of them are risks to the environment. Some of them are risks to the economy and local businesses. And we're just trying to understand here, what are the things that cause them the most concern when we present them, and therefore might yield some urgency to the work of trying to prevent that kind of flooding. We then have a more detailed series of arguments in favor of making these kinds of investments, where we're not just sort of presenting a risk or a problem that we might try to avoid, but making broader, a little bit more detailed rhetorical arguments about the importance of this work, noting the importance of the variety of infrastructure in the supply chain that could be impacted by flooding. Talking about the principle of prevention. Costs us a lot less to prevent a problem than it does to clean it up and fix it after the fact. Risks to pollution that might come from the river overflowing its banks. The fact that climate change is increasing the risk of such flooding. The benefits in terms of insurance requirements, which obviously don't impact every property owner in the district, but do affect some and could foreseeably affect more in the future. Benefits for conservation of the environment, the opportunity to make investments that make people aware of the cultural history of the region and how it has been affected by flooding in the past, in particular the Vanport flood. A message highlighting the social equity goals that can be accomplished with these investments, given that low-income communities and communities of color face disproportionate risks from flooding in the region. And then finally, the notion that a local investment can help secure federal matching funds, which will provide a lot more money to support these projects from outside the community, in addition to what local taxpayers would be expected to provide. So then, after hearing all that messaging and background, we then re-ask people whether they'd be willing to support the bond measure, and then close with a question asking people about the credibility of a variety of different people and organizations that might take public positions on flood protection and some of these proposed projects, to see which ones they see as most trustworthy on the questions at hand. Then after that, we simply ask people a variety of demographic questions, which are largely geared toward one, helping us understand, make sure that we have a representative sample along a variety of different demographic variables. And then secondly, will also give us the opportunity to break out a variety of different subgroups of the local population in our analysis and understand which ones are more and less supportive and how reactions to different projects or messages may differ among those subgroups. So that is an overview of the whole questionnaire. With that, I'm happy to answer any other questions folks have or to focus on individual questions if that's helpful. I'll take the screen share down for a moment here just so we can all see each other. All right, looks like a question from Bob.
Yeah, no, thanks for the presentation and your work on this. I'm curious, all of this is a matter of public record, right? It can all be accessed, so none of this is gonna be confidential.
Correct.
Yeah, thanks.
And Mary Helen.
Mine is just a point, you called it the Vanport flood, and I'm working on a project to do historic markers, and NOAA and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers prefer it to be called, it's the flood that wiped away Vanport, but the Columbia River Basin flood, or the flood in 1948, because it ranged from Vancouver through Camas, and officially in weather circles, or I don't know what else to call them, but Andy Bryan at NOAA insisted in a presentation he did to format once that it's the flood of 1948. So I just guess in my efforts to make sure that people recognize that it was a large flood and that's what caused it. So just that point. But everybody, 90% of the people will say the Vanport flood, and there was a Vanport flood, but the flood itself was much greater.
Got it. Well, as we're revising, we'll think about the best way to handle those distinctions. Anne.
Thanks, Dave. So nice to see you. My question is just timing. When is the proposed timing of doing this survey? And maybe I missed that.
I think it's within the next week or two, as soon as we can pin down the final details and sort of get the last elements of the questionnaire finalized. This discussion, obviously, and making sure you're all, understanding what we're doing and that you're comfortable with the strategic approach is a part of that. But we're ready to move, I think, relatively quickly after this. And Evan, maybe I'll turn to you if, in terms of the other internal processes that we have to accommodate here.
Yeah, I would just say, Anne, that a part of our consideration will be the conversation with the board tomorrow.
We didn't really want any of you getting a call from a pollster without knowing what was going on. We thought that would be a bad look for the staff. So I want to point out we are well over time based on your awesome administrative improvements that you achieved earlier in the meeting, but we do have some additional business, including some important business about revenues and officers.
So if there are no questions right now, David, thank you so much. Evan, I don't know if you have anything to close. Okay, well, with that, thanks very much. And I think Colin, you're up next regarding the revenue methodology discussion.
And actually, I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to kick it right over to Sarah, but we have a presentation on the work on the revenue model that Eco Northwest has been working on. So want to give them some time to walk through all the work that they've been doing and to talk about some of the next steps.
Okay.
Thanks, Colin. All right, I'm going to share screen here. Okay, everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Great. Glad to be with you all again this afternoon. We'll run through this pretty quickly because I know that you all want to get through the rest of your agenda and on to dinner and bigger and better things this evening. So we're going to be walking through an update for you about where we're at, what we've been working on since we last talked with you at the end of March, and where we're headed today. So the update that we're bringing to you is really going into where we're at with defining the different, the way that we're calculating the different revenue options and giving you a preview of the model that we'll be using from here and going forward as we move into the refinement of the revenue strategy, scenarios and strategy. So that in the interest of understanding what you're going to be doing with all of this information, we'll give you a brief preview of where we're headed with this. But today is really, the purpose of today is really a report out to you. I think we'll have a few minutes for questions, but And I'll move through the slides as quickly as I can here. So since we met with you last, we've received feedback from the technical advisory group on the revenue option design. They provided a lot of great insight into the different strategies and methodologies that are possible out there to calculate the different revenue options, to set the basis of each one and distribute those revenues across the different customer types. So that was a really valuable meeting. And based on that feedback and conversations with staff, we've continued to refine the revenue basis options, or basically how we're going to make these calculations for each of the revenue options. And then to facilitate where we move forward and pull all that information together, it's coming together in the revenue model, which you'll see some screen captures of and understand some of the inputs and outputs towards the end of the presentation here. So this diagram here gives you an idea of what we're doing now, what we will be doing with you later, and where we're ultimately headed with the revenue strategy. So read it from left to right. We are in this box of 3 circles that have arrows between them, and that's meant to show that we're in the middle of an iterative process with multiple things going on. And we are talking to you about revenue options, but at the same time, we need to get an understanding of costs, high-level program concepts, and those things are all happening in tandem so that we can join them together in a meaningful way as we move forward into revenue scenario development, program scenario development. Ultimately, all of those things to come together, and you all will be helping us put together that revenue strategy, which pops out the other end. A lot more detail on this that we won't get into today. So bringing us back to where we are with the revenue modeling process and the revenue option design. This diagram, I keep popping it up. This is the recommendations that you gave to us, the direction you gave to us on what goes into the model. So the model reflects several options related to service fees. It also reflects several options related to property taxes. And again, this is exploration. We're not making any decisions about what ultimately goes forward into the revenue scenario design and strategy development and revenue strategy. So the model will allow us to understand better what each of these options looks like and how things are distributed. So that's what we've done. The model has 3 different varieties of taxes: the local option levy, permanent rate levy, and geobond. It also has service fees, which I think when we were last with you, we were calling utility fees, and we've, for a variety of reasons, moved to characterizing these as service fees. So whenever you see that, that's what we're talking about here. And there's 3 different ways that we've designed the service fee to capture revenue based on the benefits that the district provides. And there's that connection between the benefits and beneficiaries, and then paying for the service that they're getting within that service fee construct. So the next few slides here will walk through how we're making, what the option is, how we're making the calculations. When we came to you last, just as a preface, we presented a lot of quantitative results about, you know, how each revenue option produced a certain rate per $10 million of revenue generated. And we showed you some graphs. And this time, we're just going to be focusing on the way that we've refined the calculations and the bases, and the way that we've refined the definition of each option. At the end, I'll show you our key takeaways slide, which really distills what this means when you put it all through the model. For the sake of time, though, we didn't want to run through the results again, in part because we're not asking you to do anything with this information at this point. And second, a lot of the differences are really relatively small, and we didn't want you to have to strain it back to, you know, what you saw before and what you've seen today. So really, we're just focusing your attention here on how we're defining each revenue option. And again, I'll wrap this up with what this means for the different customer types, and when we do actually think about how the revenue costs are distributed. So for property taxes, the rate is per $1,000 of assessed value. That's pretty standard. And then For permanent rate levy and local option levy, we're incorporating the results of the analysis that we walked you through in January about compression loss. So all of those assumptions are based on the analysis that we did at that point and presented to you. So that piece of the analysis is folded into the model directly. For the general obligation bond, the rate is per $1,000 of assessed value. And because, and I'll have Nick pop in if I say anything wrong here, but because of the way the general obligation bond is raising money, the way that it works, we have to make some assumptions for the purposes of modeling now about how that money will ultimately be generated over time. And we will be coordinating with the person who is actually running the general obligation bond analysis to incorporate those assumptions in a final way later. But these are the assumptions that we're using now. Nick, anything else you want to say there? I don't know if you're with us here today.
Can you hear me now, Sarah?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay, great. Yeah, I think that largely the issues related to general obligation bonds and how they're being shown in our model and how it's different from the other types of property taxes or other revenue tools that we're showing. The differences mostly are only relevant at this early stage where we're trying to do apples to apples comparisons. And so all the other revenue tools that we're looking at generate annual dollar amounts, whereas a general obligation bond inherently generates a large upfront sum of capital that is then refinanced over a longer period of time. And so it just has that inherent difference embedded in it. As we move forward and the board gets to evaluate true funding packages, which I think is the far more interesting work that everyone is looking forward to, we will be having packages that are designed to achieve a certain amount of upfront capital funding and then a certain amount of ongoing operating expenses. And in those situations, we don't need to worry about these sort of artificial differences anymore. But it is important to note that anytime we're looking at any tool that does have a financing component to it, we do start looking at things like amortization period and interest rate and debt service coverage ratios. And all of those things are just a whole other sort of host of assumptions that are on top of all the normal revenue forecasting assumptions. And to make things even more challenging, we are exiting out of a period of about 12 years where financial markets were about as boring and favorable to municipal borrowers as possible. And we're now in a market cycle where interest rates are going up and up and up, and inflation rates are going up and up and up. And so these numbers certainly do have some volatility baked into them. But we are addressing all of those things and working with the district's financial advisors and bond counsel to make sure that our assumptions jive with what they think the current market assumptions are.
Thanks, Nick. And I do want to note that for each of these property tax options, they would be applied district-wide. So that's your geography on the right there, which starts to change as we move in here to the service fees. So we've organized the service fee into 3 different areas that correspond to the benefits that people enjoy and the geography within which they manifest. So service fee 1, the benefit is flood protection from the levees. And there's actually 2 components to this that we've defined. One is the benefit of continued access to property within the managed floodplain. So really dealing with the infrastructure and networks within the managed floodplain that are protected by the levees. And then service fee 1B is the benefit of avoided property damage. Both of these would be calculated, and they're layered, so it's not one or the other. But the way that we calculate them, we do have several options, which are listed in the bullets here. So for service fee 1A, we're proposing to look at this in 2 different ways at this point. One would be just a flat fee per property. The other would be a per acre of property. And we would see how those vary distributionally and ultimately when we get into scenario building, if there's a preferred method, we would pick one over the other. Service fee 1B, the same thing for calculating avoided damages. It would be a couple of different options. One would be simply per acre of property. The other is per $1,000 of avoided damage. And here we're still working out the calculation on this. There's some complexity, but ultimately it would be a function of the improvement value, the property elevation, and the flood risk. We do have to want to modify just the improvement value to make sure that this doesn't look like a tax. So we want to take into consideration the flood risk layered on top of the potential value lost. So that's what that is doing in concept, and the details we'll continue to work through. So service fee 2 is within the watershed, the wider watershed, and again, this would be imposed per acre of impervious area. There would be a standard rate for single and multifamily residential properties and a variable rate for all other properties, which is consistent with how this is done in other jurisdictions. And we would be looking to establish precedent and establish data sets on how to calculate that per property basis. Service fee 3 applies to the entire district, and this reflects the benefits, including the economic, environmental, cultural, and equity benefits that are produced from the resources, all different kinds of resources, physical, human, social, and natural, that are available in the managed floodplain and are ultimately protected by the district's activities. I see a hand raised there.
Yeah, hi, that's Philip. So my question is for your service fee 1, especially, though I don't pretend to understand everything very well as a newcomer, but did you look at, so I saw that you were looking per parcel or you were looking per acre. Did you look at valuation as a way to assess that?
Yes, so under service fee 1A, we're not looking at valuation there because that's about access to the property. Service fee 1B absolutely does reflect the valuation of the property.
Okay,
Again,
I wasn't sure if you meant access to infrastructure that serves the whole area, you know, the whole district, or I wasn't sure what you meant.
Yeah, does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay. So going back to the service fee 3, these are the benefits that potentially are enjoyed by the anybody living within the district. And so to capture that in a way to structure the rate, we would be looking at ratepayers and breaking them into non-residential properties and household units. Again, the types of benefits that each enjoy may vary slightly, and so we want to take it, and we want to take into account the potential differences in the way that we distribute the costs among those, and the way that benefits are ultimately enjoyed across different customer types. So for the rates, the non-residential properties, we would be looking at allocating this based on economic activity and potentially employment as an indicator there. And then household units would be a flat fee per household. Ultimately, in this one, there's a policy decision about how we distribute costs between or among the two categories, non-residential properties and household units.
I accidentally turned off my thing.
And we'll need to work with you once we get into the scenario building phase of this to make some of those decisions. So once we put all of these inputs and definitions and calculations into the model and run it, the key takeaways really don't look all that different from where we started when we came to you in March. There are variations, but in general, the average industrial and commercial properties would still pay higher charges under all revenue options, owing to the high valuations, the large acreage, and higher impervious area. There's greater parity in revenue options for residential properties than for commercial and industrial properties. And the property taxes and geobonds applied across the district obviously result in lower average charges than the service fees 1 and 2 that are just concentrated in the managed floodplain and the watershed. All of those conclusions should be fairly intuitive based on the information that we presented to you. And like I said, the numbers aren't exactly like what we presented before because we have refined the calculations, but they're similar in terms of orders of magnitude and the relationship between them. I wanted to give you a little preview of where we're going with the model. We've designed it so that we can ultimately input variables like target amount of revenue. We can choose among the different bases that we've described here, that I've described, and calculate things based on the geography per revenue option. And we've got in there assumptions for the collection and compression losses. And then, like I said, the geobond options, which are important when we're just comparing among options versus putting it all together in a package. Out of the model comes some information that we can evaluate the rate per customer. And we've walked you through the customer types that we have there, ranging from residential, multifamily, and single family. We have different types of, we have commercial, we have industrial, we have different public customers as well. And we have open space and public infrastructure right of way. So all of those customer types are in there. We've also set up the model so that we can look at the revenue generated by each jurisdiction, which is something that you all asked us to do last time. So we can understand the distribution across customers, across jurisdictions. And that will become, I think, important as we get into the evaluation phase. And then we can look at the average charge per type of customer out of this. And then we also have information layered into the model, baseline information about income brackets, and can compare the residential charges as a percentage of income brackets. We also do have information separately outside of the model, spatially, around minority status and ethnicity, and we can connect the distributional patterns to that spatial information based on these outputs here. So all of that information will be available to you all. These are just some screenshots of the model, so you can see what you'll have access to be able to work with, and what we'll be working with as we develop scenarios. It's just an Excel model at this point. And so what happens next? We've got the steps towards the revenue scenario model. We've got scenario building, which will allow us to choose among the revenue options and connect that with the costs that will ultimately come in. And I'll come back to this diagram here. In the next phase, we'll be merging the revenue scenarios, definitions of the programs, which will tell us costs, and we'll put those pieces together and have you all work through some decision processes, but that is all to come. So that is the end of the update here. Are there any additional questions that have come up?
I don't see any hands right now.
Just have the usual request. If we can get the PowerPoint, that would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else you need from us, Sarah, right now?
Not at this point. I think we're looking forward to the next few months of work with you all on this.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody. The next item, Jim, I think you're handling. We have a couple of appointments or elections to be looked at by the board.
Thank you, Mr. Soon to not be chair with any luck. As you know, Mike Jordan has taken a new job, and it's a very important job, and we want him to be successful in that job. And as part of that, he needs to move on from his role as chair of this group. And as you may know, Steve Fancher is currently the vice chair. Steve comes from the city of Gresham, is a little farther east than Portland, which I think is important. Steve also is familiar with our operations, and Mike and I were discussing potential replacements. Steve came up as a good person who might be willing. I chatted with a handful of you, but not all of you, because there is a lot of you. And with Mike's help, Steve is willing to serve as your chair. In Mike and my conversation with Steve, he did request that there also be a vice chair. Steve has a family, he has a full-time job. And as Steve has filled in for Mike occasionally, Steve wanted to be assured that there would be somebody to step in for him. As you also may know, the city of Portland is the sole funder of this enterprise currently. And it's very important that we maintain a strong relationship with the funding bureau at the city of Portland, which is the Bureau of Environmental Services. Your fellow board member, James Allison, is a senior member of the Bureau of Environmental Services team, and Mike was able to speak with him, and he is also willing to serve as vice chair. I want to be really clear with you all that I understand this is a board decision. And what I am here to report to you is that Steve and James are willing to serve as your chair and vice chair, respectively. At the same time, many of you could do an excellent job in that role. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to the board for discussion. If there are questions of me, let me know. But again, this is really your decision. And between Mike Jordan and I, we have found a couple of people who are willing to serve.
So Jim, can you hear me?
Yeah, so Eric, it looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a question, having read through the resolutions with the blanks to fill in the names. I'm just a little bit confused about the terminology about select a replacement to complete the term in one of the whereases, and then the next talks about it being for a year, and then the wording for the vice chair term is a little bit different. And I'm not opposed to either one. I'm just not sure I understand what it is we're trying to say here in terms of term, complete term.
Thank you. Hong, may I call on you to explain the resolutions, please?
Yeah, I had that same question. I believe that Hong was able to answer it. Didn't really make sense to me either.
Yeah, so with respect to the president's position, we just wanted to make sure that whoever is elected gets at least 1 year before they're voted out. And so and so when they're elected as president, they cannot be voted out during their initial year.
Yeah.
But they are to serve at least 1 year, and then after that, people can vote them out. That's the successor language. Sorry,
So,
Mike.
No chance for parole
No chance
in
for
the first
parole.
year.
Which is good and bad, I suppose, depending on who it is, right? With respect to the vice chair, there's definitely less formality with that, and so therefore the language did not. It wasn't necessary to specify that. But with the chair, we wanted to make sure that the chair is assured at least 1 year of service. I can't speak to the other portion of the language. Let me pull it back up.
I think that answers my question, so that's fine.
Okay, good.
And Mr. Soon-to-be chair, if you're willing to entertain a motion, I'm ready.
Soon to be not chair but I have a question before you take. I'll take that. Hang on a second. Tanny, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to make a motion if you were going to open nominations.
Go for it.
I would like to nominate Steve Fancher as chair of the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Board.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? All right, not hearing any. Jim or Hong, is it appropriate to vote on the nomination and then do the resolution, or?
I think so. I think you could also just do the resolution naming him, but it's up to you. I would say this should be a roll call vote.
Definitely. So
Hong, do you have an opinion about whether they can just do the resolution, or it seems like they need to do the nomination first, right? Hong, are you there?
I am sorry, I clicked the wrong button. Yes,
No
please do the
problem.
nomination first, and then you can approve the resolution.
All right, seeing no other nominations, Wendy, would you call the roll on the nomination of Steve Fancher for the chair?
Michael Jordan,
Yes.
Steve Fancher,
Abstain.
Eric Mueller,
Yes.
Dave Ritma. Oh, it's an old list, sorry. John Niyama,
Yes.
Shirley Craddock,
Sorry, yes. Definitely.
Ann Gravitt,
Yes.
James Allison,
Yes.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Yes.
Annie Stephenson,
Yes.
Eric Molander,
Aye.
Ed Washington,
Aye.
Bob Salinger,
Yes.
11 yeses, 1 abstention.
All right, congratulations, Steve. Okay.
You.
Why don't we entertain motions for vice chair? Let's try that, see how we do.
I will nominate James to be vice chair after I tell Steve that I think he failed the very first rule of politics, so you got to vote for yourself.
That means he'll be a good chair.
Is there a second for the nomination of James Allison?
I'll second that.
Second by Tanny. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, Wendy, would you call the roll on the nomination of James Allison for vice chair?
Michael Jordan,
Yes.
Steve Fancher,
Yes.
Eric Mueller,
Yes.
John Niyama,
Yes.
Shirley Craddock,
Aye.
Ann Gravitt,
Yes.
James Allison,
Abstain.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
He didn't learn from Ann's advice. I vote yes.
Annie Stephenson,
Yes.
Eric Molander,
Aye.
Ed Washington,
Aye.
Bob Salinger,
Yes.
11 yeses, 1 abstention.
All right, congratulations, James. A very powerful slate of candidates there. So should we do the resolutions now?
I think so. Yes, sir. Thank
Okay.
you.
Take a motion on the resolution for the chair.
Mr. Chair, or Mr. Soon not to be chair, I would move resolution 220503, a resolution electing the chair of the initial board of the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District for Steve Fancher.
Is there a second?
A second. Oh, doesn't matter.
All right, Mary Helen, get the second.
Oh,
And we probably need to call the roll again, don't we?
I was hoping we were
Yes.
going
Well,
fine with me. Michael Jordan,
No, let's try this. And Hong, you okay with me doing a voice vote on this?
As long as the board is, yes, I'm
Well,
okay.
somebody can object if they wish to. I'm going to call for a voice vote on this resolution. All those in favor of the resolution proposed, vote aye.
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 Those opposed? Those abstaining? Okay, great. Entertain a motion on the resolution for vice chair.
Mr. Soon to be chair, not chair rather, resolution 220504, resolution electing a vice chair of the initial board of the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District, naming James Allison.
I'll second that.
Second by John Niyama. All those in favor of the motion vote aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstaining? Congratulations, both of you. It's wonderful. Jim, next, I'm trying to keep us moving.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, we have Ann Gravitt needs to depart in 10 minutes and we have some important LRC business. We do have your calendar issue, but I think that may require more conversation than we have time for. The only report I want to offer unto you is thanks to your staff's great work, we are included both in the House and Senate versions of the Water Resources Development Act authorization bill. So we're making good progress on the federal side to get that federal investment. But Mr. Chair, I would recommend you adjourn this meeting and convene the LRC so we can conduct that business.
Perfect. We are so adjourned.
And all of you know there is a celebration for Mike Jordan coming up, and Wendy has sent that. If you can make it, it would be fun to see you. And Mike, I know that all of us really, really appreciate how much you've done for this organization and for the safety of the people and businesses in the floodplain. We wouldn't be where we are without you. And so it's not a time for speechifying, but Mike, you'll be missed, and we really appreciate all you've done for all of us. Thank you.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and working with all of you has been a joy, really has. And so I'm very proud of the work we've done so far, and look forward to your continued work and doing whatever I can from a little bit further away. So anyway, are we moving into the LRC meeting now? And so do I call that to order? I think my name was on the agenda, but I don't know why. I think it's because Nolan is no longer with us, and I think for some reason I was the vice chair, if I remember right. But
That's correct.
oh boy,
I think you can call us into order, and I guess maybe we can discuss a quick change to the agenda just to make sure that we have a quorum for the vote on the budget.
All right, I'll call the LRC IGA board into order, and Colin, you take over.
Okay, and Wendy, I think this needs to be a separate recording.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
Yes.
I think I can edit it out, Colin. I just recently did that.
Okay, perfect. And do we need to do a roll call?
I would
Yes.
like to, just to clarify, please, James Allison.
Here.
Mary Helen Kincaid. Did we lose
You're
her?
on mute, Mary Helen.
Okay. I see her. Tanny Stephenson.
Here.
Michael Jordan.
Here.
Eric Mueller.
Here.
Shirley Craddock. I see you, Shirley. Ann Gravitt.
Here.
Steve Fancher. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 present. I have absent Dave Ripma, Lori Stegman, Corky Collier.
All right, I think we've got a quorum anyway.
And staff request is to move the approval of the budget first, and then if there's time to do the chair and vice chair.
Okay, go for it.
So the agenda item is for the approval of the 2022 to 2023 administrative budget for Levy Ready Columbia. The process is that the Levy Ready Columbia IGA board approves by resolution that the Columbia Corridor Drainage District's Joint Contracting Authority will adopt that recommended budget. And so in your packet, it has the resolution, and the resolution would approve the total administrative expenses of $1,253,432, and then also the contributions from the project partners of, which is a subset of that total number of $801,333. And so passing of that resolution, we would then bring it to the Joint Contracting Authority for actual adoption in June next month during their meeting, and then we'd be able to invoice the partners and start moving forward with the work program starting on July 1st. So I think we've had a couple presentations of this in the past, but at this time we also have the budget and the contributions as attachment A and attachment B. So wanted to take any questions that you might have or that have come up since the last presentation of this budget.
Colin or Ben, have there been any changes since this was proposed before?
Thank you for asking that. No, there have been no changes since the last presentation of this budget. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Colin, you might want to state the resolution that you want a motion for so people know it.
Yes, it is Resolution 2022-05-01, which is for the Levy Ready Columbia IGA board. So the numbers may look familiar, but for a different board. In the agenda in the packet, there is proposed motion language. So it would be to adopt LRC IGA R 2022-05-01, recommending a budget to the JCA.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tanny, moved by Eric Mueller. Any further comments or questions? All right, I don't think we have voice vote rules here, so call the roll, please.
It's not prohibited though. James Allison,
Yes.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Yes.
Kenny Stephenson,
Yes.
Michael Jordan,
Yes.
Eric Mueller,
Yes.
Shirley Craddock,
Yes.
Ann Gravitt,
Yes.
Steve Fancher.
He may have dropped off.
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 yeses.
Okay, I think that
I got
passes.
skipped there.
What did you, I missed it, Bob.
I think I got skipped.
Oh,
I don't believe you're
I
on.
think you're ex officio on this one, Bob.
I thought I was in the same category as Mary Helen and Corky.
Mary, that's a
Yeah.
good point. So Mary Helen, as we shifted from to kind of coordinate the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District board members and LRC board members, Mary Helen is now representing Penn 2, and Corky is now representing MCDD, but the ex officio members are still ex officio members and also represent.
All right, I was trying to figure out what had happened there.
No,
I was muted
before.
before. Yeah, Bob, I was muted before. I was like, am I on this committee or which one is this? And that's like, anyway.
All
So
good.
thank you
All
for
good.
helping clear that up.
And so what else do we need today, Colin?
One other agenda item is with Nolan's retirement and also the coordination between these two boards is chair and vice chair. Staff's recommendation would be to coordinate those and have it the same chair and vice chair as the urban board's chair and vice chair. Steve is not here, but
not sure we disclosed that in advance, Colin. I just want everyone to know. So
open for discussion for other interested parties. This one is also okay to postpone to a subsequent meeting. So I asked for the change in agenda.
I would suggest that you get something out to everybody so everybody's clear on what we're doing, and you do it at the next meeting if that's all right.
I think that makes sense. And we want to check with our potential candidates and make sure.
That'd be a good idea, I think. I see James smiling. I'm not sure he's up for 2 vice chair gigs all at once here, but okay. Is there anything else other than that today?
Nothing else. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you for staying late, you all.
Yes, thanks very much. It's cocktail time, so I'll see you all at the bar.
I'm going to go use and enjoy PIR myself.
Have
So
a
see you
good
later.
evening,
Yeah.
everybody. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you all.
See you.
Good work today.
All right.